Klahauya. Klahauya means hello, and like aloha, Klahauya also means goodbye. My name is Harvest Moon. I'm a Quinault native storyteller and basket weaver. My name, Harvest Moon, was given to me by my great grandfather. Like most babies, I decided to come into this world during the middle of the night, and it happened to be a night when there was a full moon. So my great grandfather realized that my name would be with the moon. He then also noticed that my tribe, which is the Quinault tribe, had just finished harvesting a large amount of salmon from the Quinault River, and it was then that he realized that my name would be Harvest Moon. I went on a vision quest when I was in my teens to find out the meaning of my name, which is a light shining forth in the midst of darkness. It was then that the storyteller started to emerge. Storytelling has always been a part of folk life, regardless of nation, race, or creed. In fact, stories and legends have served as the history book of mankind for thousands of years. It was no different in the tribal cultures of the Pacific Northwest. Following long held traditions, tribal legends and stories are passed down from generation to generation and placed in the hands of the storytellers to be carried as gentle as a newborn and nurtured into full blown life. The storyteller must learn to use her mind and tongue, a tongue that is as sharp as the eagle's talons, as a tool that touches people's minds, young and old, words that have the power and the convictions as a chief, shaman, elder, or even the Great Spirit. The storyteller must be focused 360 degrees, just like a circle, a symbol of great importance in native cultures. Not so much speaking as you might think, but more of listening. Listening to stories that people tell provides storytellers with the foundation for future tales that in turn are passed on as history and may become legends in themselves. History, often repeating itself, gives the listener knowledge to make it right the first or as many times as it takes. With every telling of a story, even after hundreds of times, both the teller and the listener gain something new. Change is fluid, like the change in a creek bed over time, the color of leaves on the trees, or the shapes of the moon. Our stories must do the same to be meaningful to all people. The many gifts a storyteller carries, such as a story that is so well woven with words that people cannot stop from absorbing a vivid picture to each individual mind. To feed off by watching the listeners as they travel through a mirage of feelings and thoughts as a story is shaped and molded right before the listener's ears. Bends, bends in the legends, which will provoke an in-depth look into one's soul. So taken aback that their travels through life, they come upon a spark of light that brings words of the wisdom of the storyteller. Storytelling primary was for entertainment during the long winter nights of the Longhouse, but preservation of history of tribal, family, and legacy of famous feats that people accomplished. It's been said that many of legends coincide with the settlers' great book of wisdom they call the Bible. Learning the power of oneself comes if you hold a high reverence towards the plants and the animals. Last and most important are morals. Morals that will teach a sturdy foundation for a strong spirit, soul, and heart. All stories have a specific time, season, or age of one's lifetime. Like a medicine woman, the storyteller carefully measures each word. The mighty raven has the power to change herself into anything. With the use of good acting, tone, and gestures, adding even some magic, transforms a promising performance of multiple talents out of just one person. When I learned that storytelling was in the program, a hesitation came upon me. This day and age, with movies, special effects, and video games, what generation would have any interest in the art of storytelling? But to my surprise, as years gone by, I started polishing the short legend. It takes me aback on how many people come up afterwards wondering if that story is true. A slow process that takes a whole lifetime to strive to be the best storyteller on this Mother Earth. It's a real privilege to share on thousands of people, young and old, the importance and the knowledge of the Pacific Northwest storyteller, Klahowya Harvest Moon.
Right into the pop master coming in our community and Kim Amron song. I always begin towards the north music and you hey ah hey ah ha ah hey ah ha hey 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 ah ha hey hey ah ha hey ah ha hey ho way ah hey ah ha ah hey ah ah hey 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 ah hey hey ah hey ah hey ho way ah hey ah hey 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 ho way hey 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 ho oh well Klahowya means hello and like aloha it also means goodbye. So when I finish up this afternoon, you may go Klahowya Harvest Moon. Now Klahowya is what we call the Chinook jargon, but what I like to share, not many people realize, but the tribes here in the Pacific Northwest had their own language. The Quinaults had their language, the Skokomis had their language, the Squaxins had their language. But when we had potlatches, which involved more than one tribe, we had a universal language that everyone could understand, and that is the Chinook jargon. Now, as you travel throughout the area, you probably come across the Chinook word at least once, if not more times during the day. For example, there's a river south of Olympia called Skookumchuck River. Well, Skookumchuck means white water rapids. Tatoosh means milk. And if you've seen the Tatoosh River, it's fed by glaciers and has a real milky color to its water. The Chinook jargon is an easy language to learn. For example, something that has a horrible smell or a horrible stench, the word for that, all it is That's all it is. This evening, instead of saying, may I have something to eat, in the Chinook jargon, all that is Nikki, Tiki, Tum Tum, which means, may I have something to eat. Now, my name Harvest Moon. Like most babies, I decided to come into this world during the middle of the night. But it happened to be a night when there was a full moon. So my great-grandfather knew that my name would be with the moon. He then realized that my tribe, which is the Quinault tribe, had just finished harvesting a large amount of salmon from the Quinault River. And so it was, my great-grandfather knew that my name would be Harvest Moon. Now, I didn't get that name until I was almost 18. That is my adult name. Prior to that, I had a name just like yourself, but it's very common that aunties, uncles, or grandparents give you nicknames. And no matter how old you are, they may still call you by your nickname. For example, my brother, his nickname was Poopsie. My father was very, very smart when he was young. We had a tendency to be backwards, so his nickname was Dum Dum. I had a gentleman from the Quinault tribe. He came up and he introduced himself and he goes, "Hey, my name's Clam. Do you dig it?" So the nicknames are all in a good way. But all I like to do is I always begin this legend that was gifted to me by a very prestigious storyteller named Johnny Moses. And after he shared his legend, he too gave me permission that I too may start sharing the legend. And as celebrating 26 years of telling stories, my adaptation of the story is a tad bit different than his is to this day and age. But what I'd really like to share with you is when I'm sharing this very first legend, I'm actually seeing how big your ears are. And by telling me, well, if you're going to sit there looking like, let's see, what we're going to have for dinner tonight, I gotta balance my checkbook, I gotta go over and do, well, then the next legend won't be as good. But if the ears become larger, then the stories will grow as big as your ears. This all began years ago. There was this very prestigious young chief. And whenever he talked with his heart. Whenever he listened with his mind. And when anyone was in need, he was there to give. Well, because of these beautiful characteristics, people from all over came to live with him in his longhouse. And as the years went by, soon the longhouse became very cramped and crowded. He raised his talking stick, and in a very kind voice he said, "Let us all work together, and we'll build the most beautiful longhouse in the Pacific Northwest." Well, the very next day, all the people working side by side started to build this longhouse. It took them over 4 years to finish the longhouse. And it's been said that that longhouse ended up to be 1 whole mile long. And on the completion, the chief jumps up on the roof of the longhouse. He faces his way to the north and he bellows, "All that can hear me can come to my potlatch." He faced his way to the east. "All that can hear me can come continued in all four directions until he lost his voice. That night, people from all over came to the potlatch. The men wore their beautiful carved masks. The women were adorned with their beautiful button blankets. They were singing and dancing and having a wonderful time when all of a sudden there was this strange knock on the longhouse wall. The chief pulled the blanket of the door open and he looked out, and to his surprise, there had been at least 25 dogs standing outside the door of the longhouse. Now, back in those days, when the animals spoke, our people could understand what they said. And the dogs barked out, and the dogs said, "Hey, you said all that can hear you can come to your potlatch. Where's the food?" Well, the people, the chief, lost with words for a moment, finally came forward and said, "There's been a misunderstanding. Dogs don't come to a potlatch. It's just for people." And the dogs retorted and they said, "But you said," I know. "No dogs can come to the potlatch." Well, the dogs put their heads down and they walked to the edge of the woods, pondering over why they couldn't go to the potlatch, until one of the dogs perked up and said, "Hey, why don't we build our own longhouse and we'll have our own potlatch and it'll be just for dogs." Well, all the dogs working together, they built the cutest little longhouse. It was only about so tall and about twice as big as this room. On the completion, one of the dogs jumps up on the little roof of the longhouse. He too barks in all four directions until he too loses his bark. But as the sun was falling to the west, a very old elder dog got a very worried look on his face. The younger dogs came up quietly with their ears open and their mouths closed. The younger dogs go, "Why do you look so worried? We got a beautiful longhouse. There's going to be singing and dancing and all kinds of food." Well, the old elder dog spoke and said, "Well, being it's so rainy and muddy, my tail is really dirty. And if all the dogs come into the longhouse, they're going to be so happy that their tails will make the walls all muddy and dirty." Well, that's a good concern, until one of the dogs perked up and said, "I have the answer. All we have to do is we'll place pegs on the outside wall of the longhouse, and we'll make it a rule. Any dog who comes into the longhouse they have to pop their tail off and hang it on the peg. Problem solved. That night, dogs from all over came to the potlatch. They all popped their tails off, hung them on the pegs. They were singing and dancing and having a wonderful time when all of a sudden there was this strange knock on the longhouse wall. The dogs go, "This is the people." And these people are going to want to come to our potlatch, and we're going to tell them no people can come to our potlatch. Well, the dogs pulled the blanket of the door open, and they looked out, and to their surprise, there had to been at least 30 coyotes standing outside the door of the longhouse. And the coyotes bellowed out, "Ah! Ah!" And the coyote said, "Hey, cuz, you said all that can hear you can come to your potlatch. Come on, cuz, let us in." Well, the dogs looked at the coyotes and they go, "No coyotes can come to our potlatch. It is just for dogs." Well, the coyotes put their heads down and they walked to the edge of the woods, pondering over why they couldn't go. But they waited for about an hour, and the coyote snuck back, jumped up on the little roof of the longhouse. They quietly pulled back the cedar planks, and the coyotes yelled, "Fire! Fire!" Well, those dogs ran out of the longhouse. They grabbed any tail they could find and popped it on. And so, to this day, whenever you see two dogs meeting, they're still looking for their own tail. So one evening,